Thank you everyone for taking your time off a weekday. It could be the morning, afternoon, or night for all of you, depending on where you're from. Thank you for joining us at Sumud and Seoul, where we'll be hearing from our two amazing speakers about not just the ecocide that we're witnessing in Gaza right now, but also about Palestinian land defense, the resistance, and more importantly, how we will be how we can witness their resistance and how we can pay solidarity from wherever we are. Okay, so before I hand the time over to our guest host, I will be sharing some ground rules to keep all of us safe and to keep this space inclusive for everyone. So on anonymity, first, please refrain from sharing names after this event. We adopt the Chatham House rules here, which means that you are free to share the knowledge you have gained and to quote other participants, but please do not identify any individuals or to share any of their affiliations. So that's it. Also, no screenshots, photos, or videos of other participants. We may share snippets from today's discussion for post-event publicity, but we would be sure to also keep those anonymous. And next point, please protect your identity to the level that you're comfortable. This could include keeping your camera off if you prefer, using your initials or a nickname, and you could do so through your Google account settings. And a third point on this one, recording is strictly limited to Echoes of Gaza only. We will be recording this for documentation as well as for post-event sharing. So we hope that all of you could help switch off all of your personal note takers as well as recording tools. If you have any questions, please reach out to us. Next point is on tone and language. I'd like to first note that because we have a diverse group of participants today, including people from Palestine, tone and language is especially important for this session, as it always is. So number one, please maintain decorum throughout the session. This means being respectful in your tone and choice of words, and no abusive language will be tolerated. Next point is to speak kindly. So we highly welcome questions and comments throughout the session, but we would need all of us to keep an open and curious mindset when it comes to doing so. So at Echoes of Gaza, we focus our work on Palestine. So for this event as well, please keep the focus on Palestine. The chat will be monitored for safety, and anyone violating the guidelines will be removed. Okay, so finally, let me introduce our guest host. Our guest host for today is Yongfeng. Yongfeng has previously worked as an architect and returned to Singapore last year after completing a master's in political ecology, environmental justice, and degrowth in Barcelona. He currently works in book publishing, and he organizes with Singapore Climate Rally and with the independent media network Nimbus. So Yongfeng's own knowledge directly contributes to our conversation today on Sumud and Seoul as well. So with that, I hand the floor over to Yongfeng.
Thanks, Coco, and thanks to the Echoes of Gaza team for inviting me to this wonderful event. Today the title of the event is Sumud and Soil, and I'm sure many of you have heard this term. So Sumud, it literally means steadfastness, but to Palestinians it means far more than that, and than simply being resilient. And it's the decision to remain rooted. It's an active commitment to life, and so what does this mean when we talk about like more specific examples like growing olives? It's acts of everyday resistance. So on the next slide, it can be things like harvesting olives, saving seeds, returning to the fields every season. And these are things that people do despite knowing that, for example, planting a tree, it could be many decades before you get to yield the fruit, but you still do it knowing that with the hope that future generations can benefit, and with the optimism that there's a future for the land and for these acts of resistance. And these ordinary acts become extraordinary under occupation, under a landscape of war when there's so much uncertainty and destruction. And before we start, and then before I introduce our two wonderful speakers, we're going to do a warm up. So a short poll. So the question is, when you hear the word ecocide, what comes to mind? So that we've talked a lot. There's been a lot of talk about about the genocide in Gaza, but there's also a wider ecocide that's happening. And we want to know, like, what does the audience think about when you see this word? So just wait for the poll to pop up and choose the answer that reflects what you feel.
So for anyone struggling to find the poll, it should have popped up on a purple icon on the top right corner of your browser.
We'll just wait another minute for everyone to put in their responses. But it looks like there's a clear choice. So the options are environmental destruction during war. Second, the deliberate targeting of the people through their land. The third, something I know happens but haven't connected it to Palestine. And fourth, I've never heard of it before. It looks like the majority of the people who put in their votes voted for the first one. So the environmental destruction during war. But I think it's also like quite closely related to the second one in terms of the way that as we'll learn later in the session today, how the destruction of the environment is closely linked to also the targeting of the people and making the land unlivable to drive people out of the land, to make it just so difficult to survive. And yeah, so thank you for your responses. And yeah, so when the land is threatened, so is culture, so it's history, and so are future generations. And in Palestine, land is not simply property, but it holds memory, it holds family and identity, and agriculture and livestock. So that there are families who have lived uh, through many generations on the same piece of land, cultivating the same trees, the same buildings that have been passed on through generations. And so this is why targeting land and targeting the environment is also targeting the people. Before we move on to Dr. Rania's lecture, we also like to give some quick context because Dr. Rania will also explain more about this. So uh, before the current political divisions on the map were drawn as they are, as we see them today, the Greater Syria region was loosely administered as a single unit under the Ottoman. And it was only after World War One when the French and British mandates divided it into artificial states of the today what we know as Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, Transjordan, and destroying a centuries-old economic and cultural space. And this is also has happened in many parts of the world where that has gone under effects of colonization. If you want to know more, you can read about the 1916 Sykes-Picot Agreement. That's a clear example of enduring colonial violence and one that has created a space for the Zionist settler colonization to date. So do keep this in mind as you listen to the lecture sharing by Dr. Rania. And yeah, without further ado, let me introduce Dr. Rania Masri, who will be our first speaker for tonight. Dr. Rania is an environmental scientist, organizer, and solidarity advocate who has taught environmental justice and holistic environmental sciences at the university level for over 20 years. Dr. Rania has organized for justice, anti-war movements, and liberation struggles since 1990 through public education, political organizing, research, and media work. She currently serves as co-director and director of organizing and policy at the North Carolina Environmental Justice Network, and is from the artificially divided land of Greater Syria. So without further ado, let's invite Dr. Rania to share with us about Sumud and soil.
Thank you. Good morning from here, from North Carolina, and thank you all for this invitation. I'm truly humbled to be in a space, an international space, with people around the world who are wanting to talk about resilience in the soil and who are intent to learn about liberation for Palestine. So the title I was given was Ecocide, Zionism, and the Deliberate Plan of Erasure of Palestine. Ecocide is not simply the destruction of nature. It is not a byproduct. It is the destruction of relationships between people and the land, between rivers and communities, between forests and cultures, between generations and the futures that they should inherit. It is the deliberate dismantling of the conditions that make life possible. And that's why when we look at ecocide, we understand it from a position of power. It is not an unfortunate collateral damage of war. It is a deliberate intent of war. We saw it happen in Vietnam very clearly. From 1962 to 1971, the US Air Force sprayed nearly 19 million gallons of herbicides in Vietnam. 19 million gallons of toxic chemicals, of which at least 11 million gallons was Agent Orange. An additional 1.6 million gallons of herbicide was applied to roadways and communication lines. And when they were asked, the official answer from the US was, one, to defoliate the trees to improve observation. So the first main reason for putting millions of toxic chemicals in Vietnam was to destroy the vegetation, to destroy the trees, so that the aggressor, the United States, could see the people living under the trees, could be able to kill more easily the people trying to defend their land. And the second official reason we were given was to destroy the crops for the people of the land. We saw this happen in Vietnam, and the United States has been doing this in almost every single war the United States has launched. And let us remind ourselves, the United States is a country that for 92% of its history, it has launched wars on other people. And not one of these wars has been, defensive, not one. So we are here to talk about this. And for me, it's a deeply personal topic, but I don't think it's impersonal to any one of us. I recognize that imperialism and war has touched every single one of our lives in one way or another. My own story begins in Bilad al-Sham, also known as the Fertile Crescent, or also known as Greater Syria. It is the land that right now is what is known as Lebanon and Palestine and Syria and Jordan, and this cancer on our land called the Zionist entity. I do not come, though, from the Middle East, because I am not east of anywhere and I am not middle to anywhere. So we have to also dismantle that term. I come from a land divided by European colonial powers, one part that is now occupied by a racist, genocidal, settler colonial entity, and another that has been subjected to repeated invasions, occupations, sanctions, and wars. And all of this has been happening for more than 100 years. I personally have known war, my family has known war, my homeland has known war, and still it knows it still. We have known mass murder, we have known starvation, we have known the destruction of our livelihoods, the uprooting of our trees, the polluting of our rivers, the blackening of our skies. We have known that planes are not something that brings loved ones, but planes tend to bring bombs and destruction. To understand ecocide, we recognize it cannot be separated from colonialism, from capitalism, from militarism, and from racist supremacy. These are all mutually reinforcing systems. But to also understand where we are today, I think it's really important to understand how we were, how we used to live. Everyone here is familiar with the destruction that has been rained on our land. Everyone here has seen one of the pictures that have come out of Gaza, or maybe southern Lebanon, or maybe Nablus, or maybe Jerusalem. But we need to understand how we used to live. My family traces its roots back to a mountainous village in central Lebanon for more than 700 years. And we are a typical family that can trace our roots back that long. The village did not change. The borders moved around us. Before colonial borders divided us, we lived a pluralistic society, multi-religious, multi-ethnic, multilingual, communities defined by relationships through trade, agriculture, family, and shared history, and not communities defined by religion. Bilad al-Sham, where approximately 12,000 years ago, human societies began the agricultural revolution. 12,000 years ago. Agriculture allowed people to settle, to cultivate the land, to build permanent communities, and eventually create cities. Some of the world's oldest continuously inhabited cities are our cities. Ariha, otherwise known as Jericho in Palestine, Jbeil, Byblos in Lebanon, and Damascus in Syria. These are the three oldest continuously inhabited areas in the world. Our agricultural traditions reflect this continuity. We cultivated heirloom seeds adapted over countless generations. Farmers throughout the land of what is now Palestine, Syria, and Lebanon built terraces along our mountainous slopes, terraces that captured rainwater across the mountain landscapes. Olive trees, some centuries old, thousands of years old, connected generations through harvest after harvest after harvest. Communities depended upon rain-fed agriculture, olive oil production, grain cultivation, vineyards, orchards, and the seasonal regular gathering of wild herbs. Trade connected our cities long before modern nation states existed. A farmer from Galilee could sell produce in Damascus. Merchants from Beirut traded in Jerusalem, Aleppo, and Cairo. Families lived across what are today international borders, but were not international borders for my own grandfather. And even my father, they were not international borders. Seasonal workers followed agricultural harvest throughout the region. Ports such as Beirut, Tripoli, Haifa, Jaffa, and Gaza connected us to the wider Mediterranean. We had a train, a railway that connected communities across the region, facilitating the movement of not only people and goods, but songs. And we can still trace our continuity through songs. We were not a collection of isolated society. We were an interconnected civilization. Whenever I think about it, it pains me. I feel like I cannot breathe just remembering all that my grandfather had, and all that Baha's grandfather had, and all that has been taken away from us. Damascus, Jerusalem, Aleppo, Beirut, Gaza became centers of learning, of commerce, of culture. This is the world where I come from. This is the world that settler colonialism set out to dismantle deliberately. The Europeans came to our land. They divided us, carved us apart. They chose not to live with us, although they could have. They chose not to live beside us, not to worship alongside us, not to farm with us. They chose to replace us. In Palestine, we say, أخذوا بيوتنا مفروشة. They took our homes furnished. Imagine stepping into a furnished home. If we are to understand ecocide as a tool of settler colonialism, there is perhaps no place more important than Gaza to start with. Today, like I said, the name Gaza invokes images of destruction. We think of destroyed buildings, children buried beneath rubble, starvation, siege, and relentless bombardment. But to grasp the horror of what we are witnessing, we need to understand our history. Gaza is symbolic of the entire region. Gaza is much more than a strip. Gaza is one of the oldest continuously inhabited cities on earth. Its history stretches back to 3,000 years before Christ. making it not simply a Palestinian city, but one of humanity's oldest urban centers. It is the crossroads of Africa, Asia, and Europe. It is the gateway connecting civilizations, connecting us from Egyptian to Canaanite, to Philistine, to Persian, to Greek, to Roman, to Byzantine, to Arab, to Ottoman. All of these communities passed through Gaza. Empires came and went, and Gaza stayed. The earliest settlements in Gaza date back to 3,000 years before Christ at sites like Tel el-Sakan. They were initially fortified outposts built by ancient Egypt. 600 years before Christ, Gaza flourished as a free port. Gaza minted its own coins, becoming one of the first cities in the Mediterranean to mint its own coins. By the 19th century, under the local Ridwan dynasty, it became a bustling market, known for producing soap, cotton, and citrus fruits, known for trade, known as a regional hotspot. It was also a center, not only of trade, but of scholarship, of agriculture, of culture. It was not a strip. It was a vibrant coastal region integrated into our economy. Citrus exports, particularly Jaffa oranges, were shipped globally via the port of Gaza. The world's oldest mosques and churches around the world were in Gaza. The Great Omari Mosque and the St. Porphyrius Church of Gaza, two of the oldest places of worship. The mosque was built a very long time ago. It had a stone structure. It dates back to the 7th century. Before it became a mosque, it was a church, and before it was a church, it was a pagan temple. And this mosque was destroyed in December 2023. But the destruction did not begin in 2023. In 1948, when the Zionist invaders and terrorists expelled many of us from our homes, 700,000 Palestinians expelled from their homes, hundreds of thousands went to Gaza. Gaza's population in 1948 changed from being a place for Gazans to being a refuge for refugees from Jaffa and Haifa and Lid. The population of Gaza more than doubled. And then in 1967, it was occupied by these Zionist infiltrators and terrorists. And in 1993, Israel continued its control of Gaza's borders and airspace. And after a popular election, Israel intensified its control from 2006. Israel and Egypt, a criminal blockade, cutting off Gaza from the land, from the sea, from the air, cutting off every aspect of Gaza. And because that was not enough for these genocidal monsters, they instigated what they called mowing the lawn, referring to our people as if we are weeds. 2008 and 2009, 2012, 2014, and 2021, destroying our families and our infrastructure. Even before the genocide, the United Nations said that Gaza was unlivable. More than 90% of the water in Gaza was contaminated. But that was not enough for these monsters. Since October 2023, there has been an open, clear, ongoing genocide. Up to 800,000 Palestinians in Gaza have been killed. And the killing goes on. 70% of Gaza is now under Israeli occupation. There are on high poles throughout Gaza, there is a drone connecting a machine gun that sprays fire constantly on the people living in tents. A laboratory of violence where new technologies such as AI-driven targeting systems, Lavender and Where's Your Daddy and the Gospel, autonomous drones and biometric surveillance have been tested on our people without accountability so that they can be battle tested and exported around the world. Entire neighborhoods, universities, schools, hospitals, archives, mosques, churches, libraries, museums, agricultural lands, all deliberately destroyed. Water systems, sewage treatment facilities, fisheries, bakeries, food production, all deliberately targeted. The destruction extending far beyond any military objectives, specifically to kill. Even denying Palestinians the opportunity to watch the Argentina-Egypt World Cup game, where the organizer of that match was assassinated 3 minutes into the match. If I could ask the organizers to please showcase the video that simply shows Gaza before and after. Gaza in 2023 and Gaza in 2025. Even though our people are denied from going into the sea and fishing, our children still have found ways to play. I just got across a video this morning that talks about our children in Gaza still finding ingenuous ways to play. Now, you may ask yourself, what political ideology could produce such a project? What political ideology could be supporting such ongoing killing? What political society, where poll after poll after poll shows that 90% of these people support the genocide and mass rape of Palestinians? And that ideology has a very clear name, and there is power in naming it, because we need to name it so we can fight it. That name is Zionism. Zionism is the belief that Palestinians can and must be expelled from their homeland so that settlers can take their place. Zionism, a transnational ideology that invents a people out of a religion. We need to be very clear. There is no such thing as the Jewish people. A people cannot be a religion. There's no such thing as the Christian people. You convert in and out. You choose to worship how you wish. We as a people are an ethnic group. We are Arabs. We are Assyrians. We are Kurdish. But we are not a people determined by our religion. Zionism invented a people out of a religion. They invented and transformed our books of worship, both the Old Testament and the New Testament, to transform our God into a real estate agent. They developed an exclusive ownership of a land that is not theirs, claiming divine entitlement while erasing our land's continuous multi-civilizational history. Zionism is an exclusionary settler colonial project dependent on Western imperial power. It is dependent on Western imperialism. In the words of the Zionist foremost leader, Theodor Herzl, he said, and I quote, "The Jewish state ought to be a portion of the rampart of Europe against Asia, an outpost of civilization as opposed to barbarism." Imagine people coming to your neighborhoods and seeing you as a savage and a barbaric individual who must be removed. Early Zionist leaders were aware that the objective of establishing a Jewish state where Jews are not the majority could only be achieved with the backing and support of the European powers. Thus, they positioned themselves with imperial powers. Zionism advances a supremacist society in which land sovereignty and political rights are monopolized by one group, posing a fundamental threat to the democracy and the people of the region and the world. It is racist, supremacist, settler colonial, and an existential threat to the peoples of the region. And what I mean by an existential threat is, so long as there is a Zionist entity, there will not be any semblance of peace for the entire region, extending beyond Palestine, extending into Syria, and Lebanon and Jordan and Egypt and Iran, extending further into the Arabian Gulf. And when we look at the crimes of the Zionist entity, we could even argue extending all around the world. The first organized military force to systematically displace Palestinians was in 1909 by these European terrorists, 1909. Since then, every single Israeli prime minister, president, and Zionist leader, every single one has voiced clear intent to erase the Palestinian people from our lands, either by forced expulsion or by military violence. More than 100 years of genocidal intent with vast popular support from Israelis and from European governments and from the United Kingdom and from the United States. The first Prime Minister of Israel, David Ben-Gurion, said, and I quote, "We must expel Arabs and take their place. We shall abolish partition and expand to the whole of Palestine." Actually, their plan extended beyond the borders of Palestine into the borders of what is now Syria and Egypt and Lebanon. For 100 years, they have been massacring entire communities, kidnapping our children, stealing our children, using systemic rape as a weapon of genocide, poisoning our wells and imposing famine and starvation on our families, and celebrating and applauding these atrocities while considering our defenders, our heroes, our political leaders as terrorists and savages. When these Jewish Europeans, mostly from Eastern Europe, came to our land and saw our people united by our love of land and not divided by our religious faith, they were not happy. They went to Beit Sahur, a village right beside Bethlehem, the birthplace of Jesus. They went to Beit Sahur in the now occupied West Bank, where they saw the oldest Christians in the world, living alongside Jews and Muslims, all as Palestinians. And they demanded that the Jewish Palestinians in Beit Sahur either leave and go to 1948 Palestine, the first part of Palestine to have been occupied and stolen by them, and become settlers in their own racist entity, or convert out of Judaism. They demanded that they convert out of Judaism because for their ideology, seeing Palestinian Jews live right next to Palestinian Christians and Palestinian Muslims would dismantle their idea that they can live with us. They want to show the world that they can only live on top of us. Since the 1930s, their crimes have increased with very little accountability, and the horrors in our land, in Palestine and in Lebanon and in Syria, are allowed because the notion of an indigenous savage has been allowed to flourish in settler narratives for centuries. We are supposed to believe that the settler is the defender and the native is the terrorist who resists. Of course, this is not the case, and we know this not to be the case, but it still on goes. In Gaza, Israel's announced ethnic cleansing plan in Gaza is today to starve Palestinians, to cage them, then to deport the survivors and relocate 1.2 million Jews, some from Brooklyn, New York, to Gaza. This is their so-called final solution. As Gideon Levy says, it is a plan worthy of Adolf Eichmann, the Nazi bureaucrat who orchestrated the Holocaust logistics. And it is not limited to Gaza. We need to be very aware. Today, armed settlers supported by the Zionist army roam with impunity throughout Palestinian villages in the occupied West Bank, while Israeli occupation forces provide protection. The United Nations has recorded more than 3,000 incidences of settler violence in the occupied West Bank over the past 2 to 3 years. More than 1,000 Palestinians killed, including more than 200 children. All this while the Israeli state continues to wage a genocidal war on Gaza, less than 100 kilometers away. You talk to Muntasar al-Maliki, a resident of Kufr Malik, who says, and I quote, "What is happening right now is the erasure of humans, trees, and stones, and anything that is Palestinian by settlers under the support of the military." Meanwhile, Palestinians in the 1948 territories continue to face intensifying repression and ghettoization. And in Lebanon, where Israel violated the so-called ceasefire more than 4,000 times and then reopened the war against us, killing more than 3,100 Lebanese civilians. injuring more than 9,600 others, and continuing to occupy and destroy more than 55 villages in the south, where what they have been doing to Gaza, they are now doing to southern villages. And in Syria, since the imposition of the Al-Qaeda Jolani regime by the United States, Israel has expanded its occupation beyond the Golan Heights into southern Syria, all while bombing Damascus and other cities, all while working with the United States to partition Syria. More than 7,000 Syrians have been killed and slaughtered by the Al-Qaeda regime, and hundreds of girls and women kidnapped. And recently, the Israeli military's deliberate destruction of civilian homes in Qanaitra in southern Syria have continued since December 2024. The Lebanese borders with Syria that were an open, fluid borders between one people are now all controlled by the Zionist genocidal regime. And the crimes extend to Iran, of course. We know that what is happening is a US-Israeli war on Iran. And beyond that, this cancer that is Zionism extends around the world. Israel trained the Nicaraguan Contras and the Guatemalan juntas. It armed apartheid South Africa, and it kept Rhodesia on life support as that former settler colony faced growing international isolation. It was Mossad's techniques, torture techniques that were applied in imperial Iran. And we see that apply around the world. You look at Somaliland, you look around the world, and where there is torture, where there is genocide, I am sure you will find Zionist, and you will find the Zionist entity. But resistance continues. Resistance has continued for more than 100 years. While Israel's finance minister Smotrich said, and I quote him, he said, international law does not apply to Jews. That's the difference between the chosen people and the others. People around the world are saying no. People around the world are saying there is no master race. There are no chosen people of God. We are all children of God. People around the world have stood up, where now the most well-known flag around the world is the Palestinian flag. People around the world are recognizing the brilliance, the divinity of the armed fighters in Palestine, the heroism of the armed fighters in Gaza, the heroism of Yahya Sinwar, the heroism of the armed fighters in Lebanon. They would make stories that would make Greek mythology seem pale. And we still hold on to these stories. Every day I wake up to another martyr from our region, and every day I wake up to their families celebrating their martyrdom, recognizing that our land will only be liberated with our blood. More than 55 years ago, Ghassan Kanafani told us that imperialism has laid its body over the world, the head in Eastern Asia, the heart in the Middle East, its arteries reaching Africa and Latin America. Wherever you strike it, you damage it, and you serve the world revolution. Wherever we strike it, we damage it, and we can serve the world revolution. If you strike it wherever you are contributing to the liberation of our lands. This is beautiful. When we think of our resistance as connected, and our resistance needs to be global. The massacres that we have witnessed in Gaza and are continuing to witness are a test of our capacity to endure and accept repeated atrocities without shaking the foundation of the global imperial system. We need to shake that foundation. As Haidar Eid explained, these horrors are aimed at expanding the boundaries of what is considered normal and acceptable, so that it becomes easier to be even more brutal around the world. Therefore, our resistance needs to be global. Today, our people are being martyred, but we delude ourselves if we think that the destruction of our communities and the expulsion from our lands will have no consequences on the rest of the world. Palestine is the world, and the blood it sheds, caused by the weapons and financial aid provided by the United States, will fall on all of us as well. So we have two options. We either surrender and normalize to these horrors and become remnants of the people that we want to be, or we resist. One path will bring us only more death, more massacres, more destruction. Another path would bring us the possibility of liberation. The possibility of liberation. There is such hope in that. Mahmoud Darwish wrote, "We will write our names with scarlet steam. We will cut off the hand of the song to be finished by our flesh. We will die here, here in the last passage, here and here. Our blood will plant its olive tree." Anton Saada said, "إن فيكم قوة لو فعلت لغيرت وجه التاريخ." Within you is a power that, if activated, would change the face of this world. I believe within us is that power. I believe within us is that power because all of us were moved by Yahya Sinwar. And all of us have been moved by the marvelous farmers tending our olive trees and our pine trees. And all of us have been moved by heroes around our communities that continue to struggle for liberation, from Singapore to Malaysia to Indonesia to Haifa to Jaffa to Nabatiye. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Dr. Rania, for such a moving sharing and laying out so clearly like what imperialism and ecocide and genocide and how they're all related, and how from even here in Singapore or wherever we are around the world, how we can stand in solidarity against this global resistance. I see many questions in the chat, and people can feel free to keep asking questions, and we will go to the questions after both speakers have shared at the last part of the session. So thanks for adding your questions. Before we go to the next part, we'll do another interactive part. So if you could scan the QR code here or go to menti.com and enter the code you see. We'd like to invite you to enter your response to this question. Imagine a liberated Palestine. What is the first thing that you see? And you can think about it in relation to what you've just heard from Dr. Rania. So we'll just wait a few minutes for everyone to put in their responses. So I already see a few words: olive trees, lively communities, peace, children. People heading to Al-Aqsa, kids running freely. Tasting Jaffa oranges. Families reunited. So a lot of happy images here, and hopeful visions of the future. I think for me, when I was thinking about what you were sharing also, I think a liberated Palestine will also have to come with the liberation of other countries, the breaking of the imperial powers, so that this liberation would not just be in Palestine, but all around the world. And that's, I think, a vision that we can all like look forward to. No soldiers at all. Smiles, people with dreams. So yeah, thanks for all your sharings. And yeah, as Dr. Rania also replied in the chat. And now we'll go on to the next segment of today's session, where we'll invite Baha to talk about the lived experience of Palestinian resistance in Bethlehem. So the earlier part, Dr. Rania went broad and talked about the history, and Baha will talk more about his personal experience. So let me introduce Baha. Baha is a Palestinian educator and sociologist born and raised in Bethlehem. He's the co-founder of To Be There, an educational initiative helping visitors understand Palestine through immersive learning experiences. He's also the co-founder of the Citadel 1865, a cultural and educational space in Beit Sahur that hosts community, artistic, and educational initiatives. Baha has lectured internationally on Palestinian history, daily life under occupation, and the significance of the olive tree as symbol of identity, memory, and resistance. And he's currently based in Malaysia. Thank you for joining us tonight, Baha. And yeah, please go with your sharing.
Thank you, Yong, and thank you for the organizers for making this um, event possible. And thank you, Dr. Rania, for a very beautiful attempt to bring in like 10 to 12,000 years of the human history on the land of Bilad al-Sham back to life. We understand as indigenous people of that area of Bilad al-Sham that we're the last or the most recent generation in human evolution that has been going on this land that we see it, we touch it, we feel it. And I don't know what is very special about us to be tested by the divines, by those criminals that have zero respect to indigenous life, indigenous wisdom, indigenous ways and methods of survival. Throughout our past, I would count up to 23 different civilizations. And many of those civilizations did not last long simply because they had a white man's attitude, in the sense that you would go into indigenous land, you destroy the people, you try to replace them, and you end up like failing. Like one example that I'll speak about olive trees in a bit. We had like a white man marching from Greece to try to eliminate people some 4,000 plus years ago. His name is Alexander the Great. He left nothing behind but like memories of massacres and slaughter. But we got methods of planting olive trees from that criminal. So in a way, even if it was one of the darkest civilizations that come through Palestine, they would leave something unintentionally, I would say, for future generation to benefit from. I fail to see anything of that sort that would be left by the Zionist criminals on the land of Palestine. They have created an evil story and will only be remembered for their evil and irrelevant impact and existence on the land of Palestine, in particular, and the land of the west of the continent or the north of Africa, wherever like Arabs actually live. The talk today is about olive trees. Olive trees, as you all know, have been a source of not only nutrition, but also its cultural significance is very, very empowering. Like if you wonder why 2.5 years or nearly 3 years of genocide going on, and still people like wake up believing that today is not my day. I have responsibilities towards neighbors, towards family, towards people to help protect them, help them survive. That steadfastness, that patience, where does it come from? It actually comes from a tree that survives through the hardships of the Mediterranean climate. The Mediterranean climate is very dry. It only rains 22 times a year. You know, for the rest, is a very dry climate. And then that tree, when you come to it, it's very patient and never complained, you know, and provides you with plenty. we learn steadfastness and we learn generosity through hardship from those olive trees. Of course, olive trees, like on the land of Palestine, the oldest olive tree is planted near the town of Bethlehem in a village called Ecology. And that olive tree is about 4,500 years old. The olive trees that you see on the landscape before you would easily be like 800 to 900 years old trees. So when we speak about its sacredness, because olive trees have made their way into Abrahamic faiths, like they are sacred in the Old Testament and in the Jewish Torah. They are sacred in Christianity, and they were sacred. Also, they are sacred in Quran. The divine and Islamic wisdom combines himself as the Nur, which means the light, and he combines that light with an ever glowing olive oil. You know, in the chapter of Nur, that combination is very, very visible. And once again, it comes to remind us that olive trees that predate Abrahamic faiths became sacred because Abrahamic faiths like recognized their importance and their significance in keeping people healthy, keeping people alive, and so on and so forth. So olive trees, you sometimes wish they could speak. Like in our indigenous culture, once again, olive trees are not viewed as things. You don't refer to an olive tree with the term it. You refer to an olive tree with the term she, her, and so on, because it's alive. It's a living being that outdates your human life. So what we do is help us think of the generations that will come. Like, of course, we don't plant olive trees because we will eat off them. No, like in our indigenous wisdom, we have a saying that sounds like this. زرعوا فأكلنا نزرع فيأكلون. They planted, so we eat. We plant, so they shall eat. Who are they? We don't know. We don't know the names of the people whose hands planted an olive tree 1,000 years ago, but we definitely, like every time we harvest their hard work, you know, we are reminded of them. And then we do our responsibilities to the future generation, to people that we will not know their names. So like you not knowing your ancestors, the names of your ancestors, and you not knowing like the names of your descendants doesn't mean that those lives do not exist. So in a way, it helps in our culture, like recognize that life is not the life given to you. Life is a part of a network of people who are alive with you, people who came long before you, and people who will come long after you, and you have a responsibility. You have responsibility in honoring what those behind you left for you, and you have responsibility to pass it on to the future generation if it's not in the same condition, in a better condition. So in a way, it helps you, like just looking at olive trees from a cultural point of view, help you understand a lot of our culture in Palestine, in Lebanon, in Syria, in Jordan, in Egypt, like in throughout the region. Also, all of the trees like fit perfectly in the environment, so that's why they survive, because they adapt to the like environment created by the climate of the Mediterranean. No other tree would survive in the same way as olive trees. Yes, we do have in every olive grove, we do have almonds, we have figs, we have oak, we have like different type of trees, but like once again, the one tree that continues to survive is the olive tree, while all the other trees have to be replaced throughout the time. If you like also numbers, I would say olive trees cover nearly 40%, 60% of our arable land. So the arable land that we have created throughout generations. When you are talking about arable land and land that is fit for agriculture, you are looking at a landscape that is made of hills. To put things in perspective, some 24,000 years ago, there was a miracle that, separated Asia from Africa. That is the Great Rift, right? And the outcome or the result of that shift between the two continents was creating hills throughout the land of Palestine. So you inherited hills that are rocky hills. How are you going to turn those rocky hills into, places that could feed you and you feed your family? You invent terracing. The land of Palestine is full of hills that were terraced, and those terraces are probably 2, 3, 4,000 years old. And it's a genius way of actually of creating life out of nothing, right? And that is kind of like what is happening on the urban land on the land of Palestine. So nearly 60% of that urban land is covered with with nearly 7 million ancient olive trees. And they each olive tree contributes, like, just to put it financially speaking, like every tree produces like an equivalent of 9 kilograms of olives. Those 9 kilograms come to like 2 liters of olive oil. So you're talking about like an income that comes, like, that family generates year in and year out, that worth like more than $160 million annually. But of course, that income is not a capitalist income; it's a shared income, right? So there's no family that actually, sells its olive oil. Every family sells the surplus, but primarily it's for family consumption. The surplus is used for other things. The surplus is used to give as gifts, to sell to whoever wants to buy, and also to, like Rania mentioned, soap. Soap was invented like in Nablus, like nearly 1,000 years ago, and it was one of the things that olive oil is used for. Olive wood production is something people have been working on for the past like 500 years, where we have artifacts, that are made of the olive wood. So there's nothing actually left for a waste from that tree. Its leaves, when you turn the olive leaves into some kind of a tea, it helps like balance your glucose and balance like your sugar levels in your blood. So like every part of that tree is a blessing, whether it's materialistic or spiritual blessings. Olive trees have been targeted by the white man or by the Israelis, like ever since they decided that Palestine was a land without people. And that's from the beginnings of the 20th century. Palestine has been a land without people in the same way Australia was a land without people, in the same way Brazil was a land without people, Argentina, North America, the south of Africa, in the sense that the person who decides the humanity of the human beings has to be a white man from Europe. So when the white man took out of Europe and went around the world spreading mass murder, exploitation, and theft of resources and murder of human resources, they rarely recognized that the indigenous populations were human beings, right? So the failure to recognize the existence of Palestinians is a European cultural norm, because Europeans have always failed, or the white man in particular have always failed to recognize the humanity of indigenous people wherever they are. So the founders of the State of Israel from day one have been busy eliminating and murdering the non-existing people, right? The Palestinian people. To the sense that more than 70% of the Palestinian population no longer live on their ancestors' land and their family property. When we talk about Palestinian refugees, we're talking about more than 70%. of the Palestinian population on the planet, and we are nearly 14 to 15 million people. 70% of us are removed by this criminal regime. Our homes were either taken, furnished, as Rania mentioned, and homes that the Israelis do not know how to live in ended up being like destroyed and flattened. So the Palestinian is removed. The evidence of his livelihood, his house, was destroyed or removed. And now we go after the evidence of his existence, which is the olive tree. Olive trees are not wild trees. Olive trees require human care in order to continue being productive. Like, yes, it's 4 days a year per tree, but like every tree requires that kind of human care. So when you see 1,000 years old olive tree, you are talking about 1,000 years of human maintenance and human care for those olive trees. So to remove the evidence of a human existence, Israelis got involved in the destruction of olive trees in different ways. Of course, like settler violence is what the state of Israel likes to get cameras to focus on, right? Settler attacks or Israeli civilian attacks on Palestinians go on the rate of 6 attacks per day. So every day, regardless of what day it is, we have an average of 6 attacks that are carried out by Israeli criminals in civil clothes, right? Because like many people like to differentiate Israeli criminals in uniform versus Israeli criminals out of uniform. So Israeli criminals out of uniform are the Israeli settlers who've been like busy burning down and chopping down olive trees. But that's a small number of olive trees. Like nearly 1 million olive trees were destroyed in Gaza during the genocide, and they were carried out by Israeli criminals in uniform. Also in the occupied West Bank, Israeli criminals in uniform have destroyed more than 1 million olive trees since 1967. So one of the methods that Israeli criminals destroy olive trees is like for the construction of an Israeli wall that separates Palestinians from Palestinians and separates Palestinians from Israelis throughout the West Bank. To build colonies, the state of Israel has more than 550 settlements or colonies that look like the settlement on the bottom picture, where the state of Israel would like shave off like mountains, destroy hundreds of thousands of olive trees in order to build rooms for Jewish Israelis. Of course, the land is stolen, so the land costs the government zero. Okay? And then the Israeli government sells the houses they sell or they built on those lands for 400% of the Israeli government's like investment. So the state of Israel makes those houses available for Jewish Israelis. So in a way, like every single Jewish Israeli person is abused to do 2 things: become a resource of income for that criminal regime and legalize the criminal regime's process of land theft, right? So the landowner cannot have a claim against a Jewish Israeli beneficiary because their claim is against the Israeli government. The Jewish Israeli beneficiary is a beneficiary of a stolen good. He's responsible for that. But the actual criminal, the thief, is the Israeli government. And when they destroy land to install olive trees, remember, 60% of the land is covered with olive trees, so olive trees are destroyed. The state of Israel, in order to maintain mobility and connection between Jewish-only communities or settlements throughout the West Bank with the rest of Palestine, they pave like people's lands with bulldozers and install highways and roads. If you look at the map from visualizing Palestine, the red lines are part of the 1,200 kilometers of highways that the Israelis installed throughout the West Bank. The red ones are where Palestinian residents of the West Bank are not allowed to use those roads. So like the picture of the road in front of you from a nearby village called from a village near Bethlehem, or a community near Bethlehem called Beit Jala, where the Israelis came in, destroyed the olive groves, and installed a road where the actual families that own the land on which the road is installed are not allowed to use that road. So it's not only that they lost their olive trees, and they lost the land that they have been like living on and off for as long as their families existed on the land of Palestine, you know, but also you're not allowed to use the roads that they install on your olive trees. Whenever you're traveling on those roads, look on both sides of those roads, you'll find olive trees. It means that the road you are driving on used to be also, you know, an olive grove. So like the Israelis have been working tirelessly on changing like the landscape of Palestine by destroying olive trees, destroying Palestinian homes, destroying our environment as we know, right? The destruction doesn't only stop on the physical destruction. It's not only like when they use, as Rania mentioned, when every winter they use, like Rania mentioned that in the context of Vietnam, but I'll mention it in the context of Palestine, where 24% of the Gaza Strip were always, every winter in January and February, would be sprayed with Agent Orange. Agent Orange is like the chemicals that Israeli criminals used in order to destroy the environment and the surface soil. In Palestine, together with the destruction of olive trees, they claim that they are making the desert bloom or make the desert green. And so, like, the founding myths of the State of Israel is one, that Palestine was a land without people, for people without land, and two, we made the desert bloom, which is actually stupid, because for 12,000 years before the State of Israel, that desert used to bloom every single year. You know, the circle in the land of Palestine is that we have 4 seasons. We start with winter, it rains, and then the rain brings land to life. So then it becomes green up until May. In May, everything turns golden because of the heat of the summer, right? That's when you collect your wheat. That's when you get your dry, let's say, fruits and nuts and so on and so forth. And then when the end of the summer, you have winter again. So we have this circle of green and golden that has been going on for 12,000 years. They say that they made the desert to bloom. They are stealing the effort of winter. They're claiming that they are winter, but they are not. There is like some truth to their claim with the destruction of the land of Palestine. If you look at this satellite image from somewhere near to the west of Bethlehem, all the red dots that you see are depopulated Palestinian communities. Those were like vibrant communities, many of which were actually larger than the city of Bethlehem itself. But the residents of those communities escaped the criminal behavior of the Israeli army in 1947, 48, and 49. And then they escaped east towards Bethlehem. When the State of Israel was founded, they decided that none of those residents are allowed to come back. If any of them would dare to come back, they will be treated as infiltrators, which means they will be murdered, arrested, or deported. What did the Israelis do on those communities? They covered those communities with something like 300,000 wild pine trees. You know, the wild pine trees that they use were imported from Europe. They are invasive trees. They are useless. And they replaced like the indigenous pine trees that we had in Palestine. Actually, pine trees that require 15 to 20 years to grow, and they produce like delicious and healthy nuts, you know? So that's not what the Israelis want. They wanted something aggressive and invasive to cover up as much of the land as possible. So what are those pine trees useful for? They are useful for settler colonialism in the sense that pine trees destroy the surface soil. So the land is no longer good for seasonal agriculture and no longer good for your animals for grazing, right? So Palestinian way of managing the land was killed by covering that land with pine trees. The second thing is it's a very dry environment in Palestine, right? Like those wild pine trees are native to Europe and Northern Europe and wetland and frozen land. In Palestine, it's dry most of the year, so they are useless primarily for large, massive bonfires, right? So every year, the Palestine has wildfires going on, and Israelis will be like, "Oh, why do we have those wildfires?" Like you have wildfires because you cover Palestine with dry wood. But every time those wildfires take place, every year, what those wildfires uncover is the truth that Palestinian communities existed and Palestinian families who have claim to those lands are not allowed to come and maintain them and clean after Israeli criminals. But we will be able to get back to those places. It's a matter of time. Each and every Palestinian family knows where they were expelled from. Each and every Palestinian family knows what is theirs and what is not theirs. So Palestinians, when return happens, each and every Palestinian family will be able to get back, tend to their land and tend to their olive trees. And the last thing with the destruction of the landscape is that Israelis cover Palestine with Swiss cottages, right? And that's what they call settlements. So the combination of Swiss cottages and European pine trees covering the land of Palestine, it becomes easy for any white man to come to Palestine and see it as a replica of Europe and therefore feel like home. So when the white man comes to Palestine and end up, in among Israelis, he will feel like home, meaning that Europe is home. So for the Israelis who live in Palestine, they actually don't live in Palestine. They live in a replica that they actually created out of their racist fantasies on the land of Palestine. What do we do in the face of all of this destruction? Well, submission is not an option, so you do what you can. What I've been involved in since the year 2006 is, very simple. Israelis destroy all of the trees, we plant all of the trees, right? But we are not fools. We know that we cannot replace 1,000 years old olive tree now. We plant an olive tree now, so in 1,000 years it will be replacing the destruction that is brought upon us by the state of Israel. We also try to support initiatives to, work on responsible, let's say, manufacturing of olive wood. People who try to revive this kind of olive wood industry that once again has been destroyed by Israel's tourism, where the majority of our olive wood production is actually sold as if it was a product of Israel or product of the Holy Land, but definitely not a product of Palestine. So we're trying to also support initiatives that keep working on that, but also whose revenues can also be used for the planting of olive trees. So as they say in our chanting, لو خلعوا شجرة رح نزرع 10. If they uproot one tree, we will plant 10. And I'll stop here. I hope I just covered part of that destruction of indigenous life in Palestine. Thank you all for listening.
Thank you so much, Baha. and also for sharing all these stories and pictures. And I think also in the chat, there were some questions, and then Dr. Rania was also sharing a few links. So I think some resources to learn more about this are Visualizing Palestine and also Forensic Architecture. So these are organizations that have extensively documented the extent of the damage and showing how it is an ecocide as well as a genocide. So I think now we will proceed to the discussion segment. Yeah, so since we're so lucky to have both Baha and Dr. Rania here today, and after what both of you have shared, we'd like to ask a few questions and then open it up to the audience. So today's topic was about both Sumud and soil, and we have many people who care deeply about climate justice and environmental protection, but Palestine is often absent from these conversations. And I know both of you are also involved in environmental work. So the first question is, what do you wish environmental movements understood about the relationship between the environment and Palestine, and what are the connections you see most glaringly missing? Why do you think this is so, and what do you do to make these more evident to people who might not understand these connections?
First, يعطيك ألف عافية أخ Baha. Thank you so much for your presentation, Baha. It was truly moving. I'll say this as an organizer currently in the United States, and I think this also applies when I was doing organizing in Lebanon. Environmental movements, well, we can separate them to environmental justice movements and traditional environmental movements, but generally, environmental movements tend to be very localized, tend to just be thinking about their own neighborhood, and to be thinking in silos and in kind of compartments. And we need to understand what we're fighting against, and that we're fighting against systemic destruction, not compartmentalized destruction. And we need to understand that the main polluter, the main institutional harm of the environment around the world is the United States military. It is the largest institutional polluter worldwide. So therefore, every single environmental movement, be it small, be it statewide, be it nationwide, every single environmental movement needs to be an anti-war movement and needs to be an anti-genocide movement. There's no other way. It's as if I want to talk about pollution, but I don't want to talk about the biggest polluter. I want to talk about, work on adaptability for climate change, but I don't want to talk about fossil fuel consumption and fossil fuel mining. It doesn't work that way. So environmental organizations, wherever they are, need to talk about how to fight militarism, how to fight war, how to fight genocide. And while we're doing that, also need to talk about what we actually are building. So what would be the alternative to militarism? What is the relationship between militarism and capitalism? This is critical. So we may think we are simply working on a community garden in our neighborhood, but we need to take that further and recognize that we need to be fighting not simply militarism, but also capitalism. We need to be building a different kind of economic system, one that is not grounded on disposability, one that does not center profit above people and non-human animals. So a different way, a traditional, historic way. So these would be the first things that I would be raising. We also need to question our own environmental movement and understand what part of our work is stemming from European colonial thought and what part of our work is really centered in liberation. There's a lot of the European colonial thought of environmental movement, which is based on separating humans from the land and creating a fence, and let's build a reserve. Let's build this little enclave and we call it a reserve, and there's where we'll protect the environment, while all around it we will continue to destroy. And this idea that we as humans cannot live in peace with our land in a way that is traditional and holistic. So we need to dismantle that concept and understand, how do we live together, non-human animals and human animals, with the multitude of plants, with the multitude of thoughts and philosophies. This is the kind of world we want to create. And this is the world that we had in our region. And I would argue this is the world that we had around the world before the homogeneity of our life through European colonialism and through US imperialism.
Thanks, Dr. Rania. Baha, did you have anything you want to add to?
Yeah, I just wish people understand that by nature, the state of Israel is environmentally destructive, just by nature. If you look at their industries, I just mention one company, which is a company that worth up to $7 billion annually, called the Israel Chemicals Limited. The destruction that this one single company is doing in terms of, using chemical weapons like white phosphorus bombs to be used on Palestinian civilians, or single-handedly be responsible for the disappearance of the Dead Sea, which is a magnificent pond of mineral water and salty water that have been created naturally for the past 24,000 years, and the Israelis are just destroying it through that company. So in a way, anything that is produced by the state of Israel, is somehow disconnected from the destruction of local and global environments, because this company sells poison and chemical fertilizers to nearly 500,000 Indian farmers, because they lost their market when they were exposed in the United States under the name Monsanto. They just changed their name. They call themselves Bayer right now, and they go on poisoning people and murdering people throughout wherever they can. So in a way, the very existence of Israeli criminal behavior towards man and towards land is being exported outside as some kind of financially rewarding kind of moves. While anyway, the state of Israel is making money out of murder of people and destruction of land. The connection between the state of Israel and the environmental destruction requires some kind of convincing. You do not need to be convinced that a criminal is a criminal. You either recognize a criminal as a criminal or you don't. And Israeli criminal behavior is not only towards life as we know it. I mean, it's murdering you, making sure your descendants will not be born, destroying the land, poisoning the water well, So it's about the destruction of every form of life. And you see it very clearly in relation between Palestinians and Israelis. Israelis are willing to kill, in order to continue to destroy the land of Palestine. And Palestinians have no other option but to die trying to limit that aggressive destruction, which is the story of the indigenous versus settler that you find in every story. The indigenous will die for his ancestors' honor and the honor of his descendants, while the settler was willing to kill everybody, including his own people. Connecting the very existence of the state of Israel with the destruction of climate and environment as we know it in the Middle East and worldwide is something people are not doing or not taking seriously.
Yeah, thanks very much for both your responses. Uh, Dr. Rania, I like how you mentioned the part about how environmental groups often tend to look at the local, but I think there's also ways where you can connect. When I was living in Barcelona, the company Baha mentioned is really Chemicals Limited. They also had a production factory nearby, and that was also causing a lot of harm to the local community to pollution, and there was a campaign to boycott ICL and also link it to the destruction in Palestine. So I think wherever we are located, we can try to find what are the links to similar like corporations, and how can we act against them in the places where we are located. Mm, I'll continue to ask a few more questions, and then we'll open it to the questions in the chat. But also trying to synthesize some of the questions people have already asked, because there are also some that people had submitted to the form, and some that I see is quite prevalent is how do we um how do we regenerate from the destruction that has been enacted on the land? How is it still possible to recover from the ecocide? Is it possible for the ecosystems and the land to rebuild? And how do you imagine this process would take place?
Um, well, whether we like it or not, like nature is so powerful. Only you need to stop the destruction, and allow land to, you know, uh, just fix itself. All what you need is just to stop the destruction, you know, and then you watch a miracle happen. In our indigenous wisdom, and we do not exploit the land, and this is one thing like people need to understand. Like land is not a commodity, land is life. You give like land like a seed of wheat, and it will give you like 800 to 900% of your investment. Nothing gives you as generously as land. So you need to stop exploiting land, which means once you stop destroying land, just watch it, and miracles will happen. So once again, like you do not need to do much to save olive trees. Just don't destroy it, you know. And 4 days a year is not too much effort, anyways. Like, oh, an olive tree cannot live if a man dies. No, the entire planet will do much better if a human being cease to exist. Like, I believe that, you know. So what needs to happen is like people of good conscience need to grow some power to stop the few criminals from continuing to exploit and destroy land, because they are not going to stop out of their mind. Like, I've never heard of a company that continues to manufacture poison and cancerous like fertilizers and chemical fertilizers. I've never heard of them like stop destroying the land and environment because they saw a dream or because they woke up one day feeling bad about it. No, they were forced to stop the destruction of the environment. So like once the destruction, like the moment exploitation and destruction of the land stops, will be the beginning of land and environment healing themselves from all the damages that is being carried out, particularly in Palestine over the past 70 plus years, and definitely all around the world.
100%. And we have seen examples around the world of when the land is left to breathe, it's able to regenerate and restore itself. So I'm not worried about ecological restoration post-liberation. I'm not worried about that. We can find ways. We can find ways, just like in the United States when they're undamming the dams. We can find ways to break free from the harm that was placed on our land. But what it needs to start with is it needs to start with the liberation.
Thank you for that. I think one more question from me would be, talking about liberation and how can we contribute to broader global resistance, especially I think most of the audience here is from Singapore or from outside of Palestine in other countries. What are ways do you think we can contribute to this resistance? And also, since both of you are also Baha, you're currently living in Malaysia, and Dr. Rania in the US, like what are ways that you work with local communities or to call for collective solidarity? I also work on similar struggles in the land that you're based in. Yeah.
Rani, do you want to go?
Go ahead, Fadlan.
Yeah, what I do in Malaysia is like I work continuously on raising awareness through lectures and conferences, and like literally speak wherever I'm invited. I highlight the fact that Malaysia is one of the very few successful countries on the planet that actually managed to be successful without being bullied by Israeli criminals. Like it's one of the very few countries left on the world that impose sanctions on that criminal regime and have done so ever since they became independent. Unfortunately, like yeah, I read history. I know Singapore was part of the federal government, but then whatever happened happened, and then Singapore was bullied into having normalized relations with that criminal regime. But here's the difference: like a person in Malaysia can easily say that destruction and genocide in Palestine is happening, you know, but we are not responsible for it. And it's like it's not like something that we as Malaysians, like let's say, pay for. You know, of course, there are a few multinational companies that you know operate under the radar, but the fact that they are under the radar shows like how coward and what kind of rats they are. I wouldn't say like countries that normalize relations with the state of Israel are equally irresponsible. Here's the difference. Every country that has economic, diplomatic, and military relations with the state of Israel is responsible directly for Israel's destruction or levels of destruction in Palestine. Of course, nobody in America, in Singapore, in Japan, name whatever country you want, in Jordan, in Egypt, nobody is having relations with the state of Israel because the state of Israel is busy eliminating Palestinians. The position is more disgusting than that because those countries have economic, diplomatic, or military connection with the state of Israel in spite of genocide, not because of genocide. And when you take position in spite of genocide, then you are more disgusting than those who support the state of Israel because of the genocide. It's just like it's a lower ethical stand, a lower moral stand than the moral stand of like Islamophobes and haters who really want Palestinians to be nuked, just like Hiroshima and Nagasaki. So the problem is with those governments that are willing to maintain economic, diplomatic, and military connection with that regime in spite of its criminal behavior. Now, what to do? Just keep speaking up and voice, your concern against politicians who kidnap the public and have them in having like normalized relations with a suicidal regime. That's it. Like it's happening throughout the United States where every single politician who's accepting money from the Israel lobby in the United States is being crucified, right? Like I don't understand in certain places, like if you are in the United Arab Emirates and you criticize the state of Israel, you know, you will be disappeared by that Arab Zionist regime. You know, because Zionism does not, you don't have to be Jewish to be a Zionist. You can be kind of a thug. Any thug can be supportive, can be a Zionist. Like, only you need to be racist enough. So there are Christian Zionists, there are Muslim Zionists, there are Arab Zionists, there are, I'm sure, Singaporean and Malaysian Zionists. There are Zionists everywhere, but like those Zionists need not to be rewarded with like a public space or a public office. They always need to continuously be exposed. They need to be exposed for either supporting the genocide or supporting their bank accounts in spite of the genocide. And remember, the psychology of in spite of is more disgusting than the psychology of because of. So my recommendation to brothers and sisters in Singapore, just keep speaking up. You're on the right side of justice. Stop, like, don't get intimidated by the collaborators of the Zionist entity in Singapore. And I hope like your future will be similar to the current reality of this political regime in Malaysia.
I'll add a few more things to the wisdom that Baha presented. I think no matter where you are, you need to identify the pressure points, because the objective here is to support the liberation movement. And to do that, the means to support the liberation movement are to isolate the Zionist entity and to disrupt any relationships with the Zionist entity. So therefore, look within your community. How could you be doing that? How can you be isolating Zionists? So that means to boycott culturally, boycott economically, boycott diplomatically, boycott athletically, boycott academically, boycott it all. Make sure that any kind of normalization with any Zionist is not accepted. Just like if I were to bring a known rapist to dinner, my friends would go, "What are you doing?" If I am going to bring a known serial killer to dinner, my friends would be appalled. That is the same aspect that we should be treating all Zionists. And by here, I also mean all Israelis. This is a genocidal regime that has the support of the Jewish Israeli society. So they are guilty until proven innocent here. We do not offer them space, and we do not look for their feelings. We are not here to make sure that the genocidal society feels good. We want to make sure they are isolated, which therefore we look at all of these aspects of divestment. It also means that wherever you are, you need to participate in changing the narrative, because the narrative is what affords the philosophy of hatred. Who are the heroes and who are the criminals? We need to make sure that we consistently work on changing the narrative. And that means even we note our discourse. A lot of times people who say that they support us speak about the death of our women and children and leave aside the death of our men, as if it is okay to kill our men. It is just the killing of our women and children that is prohibited. It is not okay to kill our men. It is not okay to kill our armed men. Let me be specific. It is not okay to kill any one of us, because we are all fighting according to our legal and moral obligations here in different ways. So just to understand that there's a whole narrative shift that needs to be made. And that can be made in so many different ways, through movies, through literature, through sharing Susan Abul Hawa's books, for example, through media presentations and op-eds, a lot of different ways. And then the third aspect is to investigate your own government's complicity. And how do you dog those individuals who are still openly supporting genocide in one way or another and openly seeking to normalize the regime, which therefore that means, how do you build democracy where you are? Because we have seen that where there is a real democratic representation of the people, there is opposition to this cancer. Where we do not have a democratic representation of the people is where we have stronger governmental relationships with this council. And that applies from the United States to the United Arab Emirates. It applies to what we are seeing happening in Colombia right now. It applies to why we had the coup d'etat, not the coup d'etat, the overthrow, the military overthrow of the Venezuelan regime, and what we have seen change in Venezuela. We see this apply worldwide. So hold on or build your democracy, because a democratic country is a country that supports liberation, because that is what we, the people, want. So very clearly, those are the steps that we would be encouraging. As to your second question, I do not have the privilege of living in my homeland. I've been living in diaspora for 4 years now, living in exile, but that does not mean that I am cut off from our people. And this is critical. There are many ways that we connect. We connect through song, we connect through literature, and I continue to bring that up because literature and song does something to our spirit. And while we fight and we organize, we need to make sure that we remain vigilant and we remain strong. And to build that psychic militancy means we need to surround ourselves with song and dance and literature. So that becomes critical. We also hold on to the people that are still rooted in the land and determine ways of support through financial support, through material support, through psychological support. That connection is critical. We continue to have that connection. And there are many ways that each one here at this webinar can build that connection with the people at home who are still being vigilant and still holding on. I do also want to say, I mean, one of the questions is about recognizing the rights of nature, and it would be beautiful, but let us understand, international law has failed us. We have seen the demise of international law. It is the legal obligation of every country that has signed the Genocide Charter, the Convention Against Genocide. It is the legal responsibility of every country that has signed that to militarily oppose Israel. Yemen is the only country that we have seen that has stood up and militarily opposed Israel. Let me repeat that. It is your country's legal obligation to militarily oppose the genocide against the Palestinians. It means that your legal obligation is way beyond divestment. Your legal obligation is military support. So we have seen the demise of international law. We have seen it fall apart. As we have always seen, international law only applies to the white man. It does not apply to us. So the same would apply to all other aspects of the so-called legal framework. Rather, it is our rights that we need to be enshrining and uplifting, and these come from people-to-people liberation movements.
Thank you for that very clarifying answer, and also very clear list of ways that people who are not in Palestine can help within their own countries and wherever people are. And I like that invitation also, like to not also think about how to democratize the places we're in and the societies we're in, so that we can more easily we can better fight towards the liberation. Now I'll turn to questions from the chat. I wanted to ask Dr. Rania, because I saw you responded to some of them. Was there anyone that you wanted more strongly to respond to? Or if not,
I leave that to you.
Okay.
Whatever question you want to be uplifting.
I think I like this question that both of you can answer. It was about hold on. What do you, because both of you talked about how capitalism goes hand in hand with ecocide, and both depend on taking from the land without giving back. So what would a different economic system built on a different relationship look like in practice?
I would say just take a moment and imagine what would it look like if we had an economic system that was not built on the profit, that was not built on the concept that what is good is what makes money, but built on the concept that what is good is what gives good, that what does not cause harm is what is good, and what supports our community is what is good. If we start with that question, what kind of economic system would we be uplifting? What kind of economic system that upfront rejects disposability of anyone, including land? What is that kind of economic system? What economic system would treat everyone the way that we treat our family, where we give what we give to those who need, from each according to his ability, to each according to their need? That is how we structure our families. What would that kind of economic system look like? For me, I look to Cuba. And I think what Ernesto Che Guevara and Fidel Castro have done in Cuba for decades is remarkable and inspirational and beautiful, from an agricultural perspective, from a healthcare perspective, from an educational perspective, from a democratic perspective. On every level, what they have built in that besieged little country is inspirational. And there is so much that we can learn about the economic model that they have built. But we can also learn, because what Ernesto Che Guevara did in Cuba was reject a copy-paste economic model. He rejected simply getting the economic model of the Soviet Union or the economic model of China and applying it as is to Cuba. And this is what we need to be learning. How do we apply an economic model of care and cooperation and love and sustainability within our communities, built on our own traditional knowledge and our own traditional makeup? This is what we can learn from Cuba, that economic models are not copy-paste, but that what is shared are those universal values of care. So, that would be my question, to return that and to have us all engage in that intellectual question. Because what is critical when we are in liberation struggles is that we not only fight against this monstrosity, this locust called Zionism, but we also find space within our organizing to know what it is that we want to build. What does liberation look like for us? What does our kind of economic model look like? Our kind of political model look like? How do we want to restore what was taken away? What is our vision? And to be planning that vision as we fight for the liberation.
Yeah, like anything that is not capitalism, in the sense that like any system that criminalizes exploitation and abuse of humans and nature. Definitely like a system that would criminalize referring to humans and nature as resources. Because when you refer to a human or nature as resources, then you set yourself up mentally and physically to exploit man or a human, and to exploit the land for what? Just for the accumulation of cash and wealth. Also a system that has a fair explanation of the term enough, like what is enough for you as an individual, because the more you get above and beyond your enough, a human being somewhere else is getting less. It's just like a connection that has to be recognized. So I think paving way for a better, an environmentally friendly system is definitely like lock up capitalists, and they need to be sentenced for, the aggressive exploitation and abuse of both human beings and land as a source of life. And then the last thing is like we need to just stop allowing criminals to deny the good people among us from standing for each other and helping one another. Today's nation state is the only regime that actually tells you as an individual that you are not allowed to do good to those who need it. And in fact, if you dare to do it, you will be criminalized. So the idea that like people who mean good and people who have the means to do good are usually prevented from those capitalist regimes from acting upon their intuition or acting upon their own a human sense, because they are prevented. They will be criminalized. Like if any of you wants to do, let's say, wants to go and like support Israeli criminals in their embassy in Singapore, you're welcome. But if any of you wants to actually do a collection to buy a tent for a homeless family in Gaza, then the entire state will come after you. They need to they need to verify the source, to verify your intentions, to verify the intentions of the person on the receiving end of your support and help. Well, in fact, those restrictions has to be imposed on criminals, not on people who do good. But once again, it always starts with criminalizing like capitalist norms.
Thank you both. And I think it's also very important to think about what was our conception of a better society and a better future as we also like deal with the current state of the world, to keep those in mind, and that gives us hope for continuing the resistance. I think we're nearing the end of the time we have today, and I'll just ask one more question. It is about could you share more about the Zionist control of water as a tool for the ecocide of the Palestinian land? Yeah, if any of you would like to share more about this, please go ahead.
Well, Israel has been using water as a weapon. It was viewed from the 20s and 30s when early white settlers will go on and poison people's water wells. During the first genocide that was carried out by 70,000 criminals who are the founders of the State of Israel in 1947, 48, and 49, they would also not poison wells with actual poison. They will actually murder people and throw dead bodies into water cisterns and so on. I think the reference to that is when the Roman Empire used water to eliminate the Nabatean civilization. So Israelis are usually inspired by criminals, so they definitely knew how the Roman Empire used water as a weapon. Here's the water reality today. The main water source we have in Palestine is the River Jordan. It's disappearing. Our water, we depended throughout our existence as humans on the land of Palestine on surface water. For the surface water to keep running, the aquifers have to be always full. The State of Israel drills the water from the aquifers and redistributes it on the rate of 24 hours of running water per person per day for a Jewish individual, and 10 hours of running water per week for a Palestinian individual. Of course, that's on average, but when you look at Gaza, for example, you don't have any running water whatsoever. Your water source is probably refined or cleaned contaminated water, since more than 96 or 97% of the water resources there are contaminated. So you depend on bottled water, or in winter you depend on rainwater. In certain places in the occupied West Bank, the most fertile piece of land we have in the occupied West Bank is in the Jordan River, or the Jordan Valley, sorry. The water ratio there is 20 liters per Palestinian per day, 420 per Jewish Israeli settler per day, which means that you rarely have enough water to drink and survive the heat of the Jordan Valley. So what happens to irrigating your crops? No irrigation for you as Palestinian. For Israeli settlers, their farms are set up by the Israeli army on land stolen from Palestinian families, and you get subsidies for 24/7 water, right? So in a way, the Israelis steal water from Palestinians in order to use some kind of a fake agriculture like activity where they end up selling that water as if it was Israeli products, right? Or Israeli agriculture. We know like Israeli agriculture does not contribute to even 2% of their national income, right? But it's good for promoting the state of Israel as, an agriculture like pioneering kind of a regime. I will finish with one thing about like Israel's abuse of water. Since we spoke about olive trees, Palestinians spend zero water on the production of every ton of olives. Zero water. Israelis spend up to 5,000 cubic meters to produce the same amount. They actually waste the water they waste is more expensive than the actual oil that that ton of olives would produce. So the state of Israel, in a way, is using water as a weapon to force Palestinians into more despair and more submission. And then they mismanage that water by wasting it on products that will make the state of Israel look as if they were like producers of agriculture. The majority of Israel's income from agriculture comes from selling poison, or what they call like chemical fertilizers. That's where their main income from agriculture is by poisoning agriculture. It's not from agricultural activities. But once again, the state of Israel have proved year in, year out how racist and criminal they are in their mismanagement of the water resources in Palestine.
Thanks, Baha, for those very shocking facts and showing how great the disparity is in the apartheid system between even just the amount of water, which is such a basic necessity. Rania, did you want to add anything?
I would just add that I think it is very representative of the Zionist society that they claim to love our land while they pour cement into our water wells. This is how filled with hate that they are. Susan Abul Hawa argues that they are jealous of us, jealous because we are the ones with history, with ties to the land. We are the ones with culture, with dance, with music, with cooking. So they try to steal everything from us, our food, our dance, our names. They have tried to steal everything from us because they know that they are nothing. And this is the cancer that we are fighting.
Thank you. And now we've come to the end of today's session, but before we leave, we'd like everyone to do a small reflection. So if you could, again, scan the QR code or click on the link in the chat. We'd like to ask you to add on to this Padlet board and to answer the question, what is one action you commit to help realize your vision of a free Palestine? So just take a couple of minutes for everyone to reflect and write down something on the board. Doesn't need to be long. Okay, we have a few entries. Boycott, donate, and support. Keep talking about Palestine, isolating Zionism. Continue supporting local and global environmental movements and support anti-genocidal movements. To participate in changing the narrative and create different liberatory narratives. To keep reading, sharing, supporting businesses that take a stand, protesting and shaming, boycotting
in-
products to restaurants and bands.
Who's into planting olive trees?
How can we plant olive trees, Baha? Can
You
we
dig
join?
a hole in the ground. You dig a hole in the ground, you get a seedling that's 3 years old, and you plant it. And then you visit it in July and give it some water in July and in August, once every year for 2 years. And if the Israelis uproot it, you go back and you plant it again. The family we helped the most throughout my past 20 years was a family we planted their land 5 times. And their trees are there. You know?
Wow, I would also love to help plant olive trees. Yeah, so I think thanks for all the sharing, and it seems like yeah, so if people are lost on what you can do, just looking at the board here, there are so many ways in addition to what both Baha and Dr. Rania have shared about. And so I think every single action, whatever you feel comfortable with, helps and adds to the cause. And I think now I'll pass it back to Coco to close off today's session.
Okay, thank you so much. We've learned tremendous lots from our speakers. There's a lot of emotions that I think each of us also has to process. So feel free to stay connected with us and to continue using this Padlet to draw your own reflections, to engage with other people's reflections as well. Okay, I'll end with this short video, also from Dr. Rania, in another podcast unrelated to us, but also called the Sumud podcast. So that's an amazing coincidence.
We wrap up.
Yeah, there is one question that folks have been asking me for 10 years now, which is, how hopeful are you? Are you hopeful? And before I used to answer by giving like this rational answer as to, oh, this is how much hope there is because of 1, 2, 3. And lately I've realized that that's not accurate. And I think the question itself needs to be dismantled. We do not fight for Palestine because we are hopeful. That's not why we fight. We fight for Palestine because there is no other option out there. Either we succumb to the oppression and we are willing to be guillotined by the oppressor in one way or another, be it by literally having our families be massacred in Gaza, or be massacred in Nabatihi, or be massacred wherever they are in our homeland, or be crippled here in the United States, or we resist and organize and we face a possibility of liberation. And I think that's what we need to hold on to. We only have 2 choices: defeat, acceptance, which will lead to only more death and destruction, or organize and resist. And there's that possibility of liberation. And I would also encourage everyone, spend 1 hour a week envisioning what that liberation would look like and what kind of a political, economic, social system we will build when Palestine is freed. And really think about it. Be planning that liberation. Give yourself 1 hour a week so that your lungs can grow as we continue the fight.
As always, brilliant. I'm going to have to invite you back on. So anytime you want to come back on, you just let me know.
Thank you.
I appreciate you.
it.
Okay, yep, same to both of our speakers and to Yongfeng. If there's any time you want to come join us again and host another event to share more of your wisdom, we greatly welcome. Yeah, time and time again. All right. Okay, so thank you once again to everyone for joining us, to the speakers, to our guest hosts. I personally feel this was a very successful event. All right, so we would end off with a little bit of Echoes of Gaza promotion. So we are recruiting to have more fresh blood to continue doing our work. We host events like today. We do community buildings that focus more on physical gatherings through food, through more stories. And we also do creative work, and that's, you could imagine the social media account that we run, Echoes of Gaza, where we churn out posts to educate people about various topics. So if you're interested in any of these and have ideas for us or have other speakers that you'd like to hear about, feel free to reach out to us. We also run a Telegram group for those who use Telegram, which has multiple channels on where you can learn about other events, about fundraisers, about other stories as well. And this is our Instagram. We would love to hear feedback from you on what you've learned, how we could perhaps do better. And these links will also be sent to you via a post-event email. Thank you everyone for joining us on this Wednesday. Have a good day/night ahead.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Sophia. Thank you, everyone.